Tell us about your background.
I'm originally from Nottingham. I came to Bristol to study history in 2016. I sort of thought I might want to do law then, but hadn't really given it too much thought. I spent the whole of that time doing performing arts. I was singing, doing theatre, touring, Edinburgh Fringe. Yeah, that was the main way I spent my time.
I didn't study law at university. I did classics instead. And then I actually ended up going into something completely different. I did professional sport. And it was only a few years after leaving university and doing sport for a few years that I made the decision that I didn't think I wanted to do that sport as a career anymore. And that was the point at which I thought about changing careers and deciding what I wanted to do. And so at that point, I then looked at what I thought my transferable skills would be and what I really wanted in a career. And I sort of decided that for me, it was really important that I had academic stimulation, autonomy over my own work. I wanted the opportunity to be challenged in my job, to solve problems, work with people, all of these things. And I sort of came to the conclusion that actually I thought the bar might be something that, well, it really interested me and might be something that would work for me. I had also done work experience previously with a friend of a friend. And that was a criminal barrister. I went into court with her when I was much younger and I'd loved it. And so at that point I thought, okay, maybe this is something I could do. So that was the point at which I decided to give it a go. So yeah, my background I wasn't geared up to doing law from day one. I decided to move into it a bit older, which I think some people are concerned about. But for me, it's been really good, I think, having life experience before deciding to change into law.
In terms of my background, I grew up in the southwest and then I went to Newcastle University. After that, I did the bar course in London, and now for pupillage I find myself back in the southwest.
How's your pupillage been so far?
It's fair to say it's an absolute roller coaster. Enlightening, at times the hardest I've ever worked in my life, but also a lot of fun.
What's so brilliant is every day is different, and it really is an abundance of interesting work and interesting cases, which I think is exactly what you want when you go into this job.
Throughout my pupillage, I think that everyone has been really generous with their time. I've had 2 supervisors throughout the whole of this year, one who primarily practices in personal injury and the other who primarily practices in clinical negligence. So I've been doing work with them and also working for other members of the team. But it's been really hands-on, everyone's been really helpful, reviewing my work, giving me feedback, and I felt really pushed and stretched, but also it's been a really enjoyable year.
How is your second six going?
Second six, I think, is you work harder, but it's even more fun. It's fantastic to be able to actually go to court yourself and realise that you are capable of doing the job. Through first six, I think it can be quite daunting going through first six, not yet practising. So essentially you spend a lot of time watching very senior barristers do their job very well on very high-end work. And that's quite daunting when all you're sort of trying to do is follow along and contribute where you can. But getting to actually cut your own teeth, whether that be on small claims trials, application hearings, written work, but to be practising in your own name and doing the job in your own rights is mentally game-changing, because it's such a more fulfilling experience. It's a fantastic reminder of the fact that you really do like this job and want to do it, and it's quite affirming in places, but also, of course, a lot of work.
By the time you've done the GDL, your bar, your first six, you feel like it's been quite a long time and you're really waiting to get to this point. So actually being on my feet now, it's what I've been wanting to do for a while. And of course there are highs and lows to it, but that's really part of the learning process. But I think I'm actually lucky so far that it's the majority of you been highs. And I've had a few clients already who've been so grateful and happy with their outcome, and there have even been some happy tears. And that's really what it's all about. So I found it really rewarding and I'm really enjoying it so far.
I'd say generally I find myself being in court 2 or 3 times a week, and then on the other days prepping those cases, but also doing work for other members of the team. It's a bit of a balancing act between paperwork and court-based work. Doing work for other members of the team I've found really enjoyable, because it's given me an opportunity to see a bit about their practice and their caseload, and also you get to know different styles and which bits you want to then go away and try doing yourself.
So why did you choose St John's Chambers?
The main appeal of St John's was getting all the benefits of a regional set. So you have better work-life balance, a nicer place to live than London, at least in my opinion. But without taking a serious hit on the standard of work. So I did the bar in London. There's a lot to love there, but I didn't think it was for me. But there's also such a great amount of work at St John's. You don't feel like you're settling for a lower standard of work just because you don't want to live in London, which is sort of, yeah, it's that merging the two. And I love Bristol.
So I previously was a paralegal in London, and the firm that I was working at, one of the partners there had actually previously been a member of Chambers, and he knew that I had strong connections to the West Country, that I was thinking of leaving London and moving back to the West Country. And I obviously spoke to him about Chambers in the Southwest, and he gave a glowing report to St John's. So it came highly recommended, and he actually had also, at that point, he was working in-house at this solicitor's firm. He also instructed members of Chambers on cases that I assisted with. So I was very lucky that I think I saw the inside scoop really from someone who'd been here. But yeah, he told me that if I wanted to go to a good Chambers to do family in the Southwest, St John's was obviously the place to go.
Primarily, the big appeal to me for doing a pupillage at St John's Chambers was that it would allow me to do a specialist pupillage from the outset. So I am doing a specialist pupillage in clinical negligence and personal injury. Also, every opportunity that I came across members of St John's, people were very friendly and approachable, and I thought that coupled with being able to do a specialist pupillage would make for a good result.
Do you have any advice for aspiring barristers?
If the profession feels very closed off from you, it feels like it's this strange world of secrets, undiscoverable rules and ways of doing things, and sort of feels like there's no real way to peek behind the curtain, as it were. But actually there is this whole world of tips, tricks, insights, wisdom that barristers are just walking around carrying with them. That's in relation to the pupillage process, their own careers, the bar and law in general. And most barristers I've come across are very, very happy to talk about that. They're very happy to share the wisdom that they have if you ask them. Most absolutely love their jobs and would be thrilled to talk about it to interested people, and in particular the next generation of barristers. So reach out is the big thing. Talk to people, ask. Of course, make sure your questions are appropriate, but just talk to as many barristers as you can. The more the better, especially real substantial conversations with barristers can just rip away the curtain and you can get a proper insight into how this world works in a way that you simply can't from just the internet or from a book.
First thing in terms of when you decide you want to apply and do the bar and apply for pupillage, I think one of the first things is you really need to look at your CV and you need to decide where you think there are weaknesses and then plug those gaps. So if for example, you think you want to go into family law, but you don't have any experience on your CV to show that you actually have done it and you're really interested for that reason, go away and do that. I think there are lots of things on a CV that you just need to make sure that everything is really up to scratch before you apply, and I think that's helpful. I think the other thing is to really make sure that you research the area that you want to go into and the chambers that you want to go to, because actually when you come to writing the applications, you'll repeatedly be asked why family law, why these chambers, and if you really know the answer to those things, they're quite easy to write. And often people say, well, what do I say there? And actually, if you really do know the area you want to do and the chambers you want to go to, it's quite easy to write. And I think it's important that you do that before you start, because for example, in family, it's quite court-based. So if you're going into family law, you will be in court quite a few times a week. If you wanted to do more of a paper practice, you might want to go into commercial. So it's worth thinking about what area you do want to do and what that will look like in practice before you start. So
one piece of advice would be to be yourself. I think it sounds, it's clear when you read an application, it's transparent whether someone's being authentic or not. So I'd say in the application stage, be yourself, but also make sure that you have other people look through your application and provide advice. on it. The bar is such a collegiate profession, but that support starts before you're even in the profession itself. I used quite a few online resources to get support while I was doing my pupillage applications. There's a website called Pupillage and how to get it. It's really useful if you're not already familiar. I'd recommend checking that out. But also they run schemes where you can get allocated to a barrister in your practice area at chambers you're not applying to, who will then read through your application and help you tailor it accordingly. Also, if you're a member of an Inn of Court, they have similar schemes up and running where they can have people review your applications. So really take advantage of all of those opportunities. They were really useful for me.
What did the selection process involve?
So I think actually comfortingly the St John's Chambers selection process from memory was sort of exactly what you'd expect from a pupillage selection process. There was no sort of curveballs, unexpected surprises, scary mind games. There was a application form that's not on the gateway, standard questions: why do you want to be a barrister, why chambers, and your few sort of mind twisty questions to give you a chance to show your written advocacy. I believe we had a question something along the lines of what law would you change and why, something to show a bit of your own interests and put a chance for you to comment on the law and write well. First interview, from recollection, involved reading over a judgment, discussing it with a panel, and then a sort of more generalised pupillage interview asking about general competencies and interest in the bar in St John's. Second interview was your specialist area interview, so mine was with the commercial and chancery team. I believe I had to do a mock freezing injunction application, and then again more generalised questions about specialism and why you want to do this work and why you want to do it here. So nothing that felt like a strange test or a mind game. It was fairly transparent and straightforward, what you'd expect, what is advertised as the pupillage selection process. Certainly a lot more comforting than other sets I applied to in places.
So the first thing of the selection process is the paper application. So St John's wasn't on the gateway, wasn't on the pupillage gateway, so they had their own application. And from memory, it was majoritively questions about yourself and sort of like what your CV is, but within questions. And then I believe there was just a legal question at the end where they wanted to see how you approached something and how you persuasively argued something. After the paper sift, there are then 2 rounds of applications. So the first round for St John's was actually, we were given a judgment and we had to speak on the interview panel about that judgment. I think mine was the Uber case. I remember it quite vividly. So all of the practice areas have one judgment to look at, and you're talking through that and what you agree with, what you don't agree with. And then of course there are just general questions about yourself as well from your panel. After that round, you then go to the second round if you are lucky enough to get there, and at that point it became specific to your practice area. So obviously I do family, and I had to do, I think, an application for a non-mol and an occupation order, and we had to write a skeleton and submit that before the interview, and then make your submissions, and then you were asked questions on what you'd said, and then there were some further questions as well. So it was actually quite a rigorous process, but I think that was a very good thing. Of all the interviews, I think St John's probably did test us the most rigorously. But that was actually really nice, because when I was then lucky enough to get an offer, I really felt like they had sort of seen my skills and my style and they liked it. So it was nice at that point that they had tested everything, and then you get there at that point. So it was a lot, but it was a really good process, I think, for their selections.
In terms of the selection process, the first stage was the written application. After that interview, the first round interview was considering a judgment and being asked questions about that. And then the exercise, depending on the specialist pupillage that you were going for. So in mine, for the personal injury and clinical negligence pupillage, it entailed doing a relief from sanction application and then being asked questions.
What social activities have you been involved in?
The lovely things about being in Bristol is there is a decent number of barristers, but enough that you can actually know a decent amount of them. So, for example, I get on very well with all the other pupils in Bristol at other chambers, and they're fantastic people to know. It's a small enough world that you can actually know people, if that makes sense. There's you will run into the same people at events time after time, whether that be junior lawyer division stuff, whether that be networking, whether that just be a seminar you're going to. You will run into the same solicitors, the same other barristers, clerks, paralegals. Faces become familiar a bit more quickly than they do in London, I think. Just because in London there are so many people and they all sort of wash into each other.
Pupillage has been one side to this year, but I've also really enjoyed the number of opportunities that have come along with it that are not directly pupillage focused. So be that networking events with meeting solicitors local to the area, be that getting involved with the Bristol Junior Lawyers Division, the Bristol Medico-Legal Society, and also Chambers itself run several conferences throughout the year which give you an opportunity to meet experts in the fields in which you're working in, but also local solicitors and other professionals. I've really enjoyed being able to go to those events and sort of immerse myself in that side of things as well.
Do you have any final words?
The journey to the bar and the journey to pupillage, there are a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's common knowledge that it's fiercely competitive to get pupillage, and people do have to face a lot of no's and a lot of rejection along the way. But I think my things that I would want to get across to potential candidates is be resilient and persevere if it's something you think you want to do, because it is a very fulfilling job and it will be worth the hard work to get there. So I think that would be something that I would want to make sure that people know that it is worth going through it all together.
I'd say to anyone thinking to applying at St John's Chambers itself, if you go on the website there is a pupillage policy which publishes information about the first round and the second round interview, and I read that policy when I was applying, but really there are no tricks or traps in that policy. It's a very transparent document about what exactly the process entails, and I found it very useful.